Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brand, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. Of course, on this Monday after the 2-2 against Spurs, seems like we are recording the same podcast we recorded last week, where Manchester United and Spurs met each other's doppelganger.
Yep.
Finished 2 each, mate. First of all, before we get into football, how was your weekend?
Yeah, pretty good overall. Everything was everything nice, everything going well. And you?
Is it starting to cool down out there?
Oh, it's cold. It was very, very cold this weekend. We're getting 20s at night pretty much every day now. And then during the daytime it ranges 40 to 60 Fahrenheit. So, it's cold. It was cold last week.
We haven't experienced any of that yet. It was 80 something degrees this week. I sort of actually miss, to be honest, a bit of the seasons. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit envious of that. You're in a beautiful part of the world. But on to the football. 2 each against Spurs at the weekend. We talked on this podcast last week. We both felt United would win the game. And it was one of those games where your emotions were all over the place. At 1-0, you're saying, don't repeat what we did last week.
Yeah.
Just win the game. And in many ways, they did repeat what they did last week. But I feel like that the equalizer, James, is pivotal, because if we're going into the international break with a defeated Spurs, it's completely deflating. Instead, what we're talking about here is United were a few minutes away from being second in the league.
Yeah.
In their 5-game unbeaten run, 3 of them have been away from home. One of those
Yeah.
are Anfield.
Yep.
I know United aren't perfect. Nobody thought they were when they started winning games, but I'm not pessimistic either.
No, it's different. We've talked about in the past, recently after the last game as well, about how there's a bit of stability that we haven't had, where the bottom isn't so bad. It's not so low. Because I think the performance against Spurs, probably the worst of the 5-game stretch in a lot of ways. There was a lot of time when they spent defending. They didn't seem to be able to get really any handle on the ball in the game. But even despite all of that, 60 minutes of the game, I felt like Tottenham had really no chance of scoring for most of the game. It seemed like United weren't playing well, but it seems like it was just going to linger on at 1-0 probably till the end. And then it's a bit of bad luck. Maguire gets injured. You get a few Casemiro asks to come off, and you get this whole big change all at once. And we've seen before, when United aren't really in control of a game, especially when Maguire comes off, Casemiro comes off, suddenly that solid box defending where you feel like they could do it for 180 minutes and they wouldn't concede, things get shaky, they fall apart, and they concede a couple goals very quickly after that. And, but as you say as well, you see the same determination, the same grit to come back. And that was down and down to 10 men as well. I mean, there's a lot of bad luck happened right there because Šeško probably should be scoring. We can talk about him in a minute on maybe 1 or 2 occasions, but he gets injured. They've made all their subs. You're down to 10 men. Then you concede. To come back and get the draw in that situation is even tougher than the comeback to score against Forest, even tougher than the one you did against Liverpool. So there's positive signs, mentality-wise, focus-wise, that we're not seeing before, that keep showing up every single week.
And we talked about this last week too, James. One of the positives is United are scoring pivotal late goals in games.
Yeah, every week. Yeah.
Against Burnley, late goal, Brighton, late goal, Liverpool, late goal, weekend, late goal, Forest, late goal. These are key moments in games that United were not doing in previous seasons. I think it was Rory Jennings was saying that it was Lennon Amorim before the game. And as anyone that listens to this podcast will know, I haven't exactly been Amorim's biggest fan, right? But when Rory Jennings is saying things like, nothing has changed. I'm sorry, you don't watch United or haven't done if you don't think anything has changed. I mean, prior to the 5-game unbeaten run, James, I was afraid of every Premier League fixture.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's different. And it's like it's and especially when you contextualize the Premier League and this season and the competition, because everything that you have to look at has to be measured against not some unknown standard, but what is the standard that you're measuring against? You're measuring against the rest of the league. You're measuring
Right.
against other teams. You're measuring. There isn't like, there's no exact points total that gets you fourth, sixth, first every single year. It's always changing based on the way the league is adjudicated in that. And United are one of only two teams to have no losses in the last 5 games, the other being Arsenal at the top of the league. So it's not, despite some of the flaws that have shown up, it's not nothing. To go 5 games unbeaten in the Premier League is obviously not easy. Nobody else is doing it.
I haven't verified this stat, but it was in the commentary at the weekend. I was watching the UK feed. I'm not going to say hi, but they said Manchester United was the youngest team in the Premier League.
Yeah, I saw that too.
You bring off Maguire, bring off Casemiro, which is
Yeah.
obviously, that these are experienced leadership players where sometimes you have no choice.
The oldest players, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, overall, the average age of the team is the youngest team in the Premier League. Yeah. You take off Maguire, take off Casemiro, they lose an awful lot in that scenario. I think that isn't being given enough credence, the fact that this is the youngest team in the Premier League.
Yeah, there's a lot of young players, and when we see some of the things that are happening, like with Dorgu, with Šeško, with Lenny Yoro in games, with things like that, Laman's, young keeper is still, even just now coming in. De Ligt is not an old player by any, even though he's been around a long time. He's still quite young for a center back in the Premier League. You average it all together, and you say, yeah, it kind of makes sense. There's still growing pains. There's still things that players, you're expecting them to improve. And I think that's one of the positive aspects to this, is that there's a lot of players in there and a team in there that, based on the age, is going to be on an upward trend, not a downward trend. So what we're seeing isn't the best and it's going to get worse. It's the opposite. It should get better and better and better moving forward, which it hasn't always been like that. Often it's been, all our good players are declining and they're on the wrong side of the age hill. And
well, I mean, another positive to me, TMZ, is when was the last time United had a signing that was as effective as Mbeumo? I mean, here he is again, showing up, scoring an important goal, and he's scoring a broad variety of different goals, key goals away from home. I'm completely taken in bets. I mean, you look at Mbeumo versus someone like Florian Wirtz. They look like they're completely different footballers on a completely different level. Yep. I mean, what a signing!
Incredible, definitely. He's done everything and more that you would hope for. He's taken that step from Brentford, and he's just continued being one of the best goal scorers in the league. And then, like you said, doing it in all sorts of different positions, and he's so influential beyond that. He's not a player who takes the plays off and is not involved in other aspects or anything like that either. He's doing everything that you would ask for, and it certainly speaks to the, if you get more people like that, it's going to be okay.
We'll talk about Šeško, obviously, because he's the one where he's been taking a bit of criticism. Has there been any updates on his injury?
So earlier today, the feeling was that it's not bad, like bad. Definitely, I can say that as far as I'd heard, they weren't thinking that there was going to be like an ACL or an MCL. That's, one of those major big surgeries that's 6 months, 9 months, nothing like that. From what I understand, though, there was certainly some discomfort, swelling, things like that. So probably not like, oh, he's fine in a week and he'll be starting immediately after the break, but maybe 3-4 weeks, a month, something like that would be at the most. They're pretty careful with injuries these days.
I know a lot's been made of the fact of his goal scoring record. I think what people should also understand is he hasn't been playing in all of those games. Correct, some of the games he's only been in as a substitute. I think he should have done better on the one that he got injured on. He's not great on his left side. You can see that. He wants to bring ball back onto his right foot. That's what cost him the chance and will end up getting injured. I think this is a player, of course, that United have scouted probably more than any other player. I mean, they have almost forensic data on this lad, so nothing that he's doing won't be a surprise. It's something where you're not great on your left side would have been obvious to United scouts. They'll have felt that that's something he can improve on. But I think he should have got a shot off, in my opinion. But you can see there's some He isn't completely confident. He also looks like someone that's still adjusting to the pace of the Premier League. To be fair to him, Van der Ven is the quickest centre back in the Premier League, so it's not a disgrace to get caught in possession by him. But he still looks to me like a player that's adjusting to the pace of the league. I understand the pressure of being the United striker. Look, Manchester United were called a striker's graveyard for years, James, and I'm talking about
Yep.
the top strikers, in the world. So it's a very difficult position to play for anyone. I'm not overly concerned about him in the long run. If United are sitting with a top class striker, I think they would have beaten Forest. I think they would have beaten Spurs. But we're not, and we're not where we were. And very few teams have a Holland. You
Yep.
know, I look at someone like Thiago at Brentford, brilliant goal return. But I think in the long run, Sesko will turn out to be an exceptional signing for United. But I also feel that he deserves to be criticised when he doesn't play well.
Yeah, and the thing is it's a bit of both ways, right? Like we do know that the decisions made to, hey, let's get a better, a young high potential type of striker and bring them in, someone we think is going to be exceptional in the future, because we don't see a top class striker on the market that's we're going for right now, and you're going through this plan of building the club properly and rebuilding it at the right thing, like you talk about the ages and things like that, and what you get is this. And so it's like, yeah, he should do better, but also you kind of expecting this when you sign a young striker, when you bring a young striker in, that you're going to get some of these games. And it's definitely the adjusting to the pace of the Premier League, young or old, takes time. I mean, there's players coming from the Bundesliga in there right now for a lot more money that are doing a lot worse,
James,
in their
I
performance. And
tweeted yesterday, man. I'm like, there has to be a reappraisal of Bundesliga valuation.
yeah,
I was thinking
yeah,
about Bino Kittens. It went to Chelsea. Obviously, Sancho's had exceptional time
mm,
there. We're talking about, if you look at the players that have succeeded in the Premier League that are coming from the Bundesliga, they're almost always players that went to the Bundesliga and then moved on, like Holland and what
yep,
have you. Delict, Mazraoui. I think they've been, Delict, and we're going to sing his praises here in a few, but
yep.
but you're looking at Beno Kittens, James. I'm looking at Havertz. And when you look at
Havertz,
players like
works.
Havertz,
Yeah.
Verts, they looked exceptional in that league. And
Hmm.
they come to the Premier League, they look physically, a completely different specimen from what you see in the
Yep.
Premier League, and they look like below average footballers. Like
And
it's
Kunku was the
remarkable.
same and Kunku was another one, came in, had a big goal scoring record at Leipzig and came into Premier League, could deal with it. And I think Šeško can, and I think he'll be, he's, again, they've watched him a lot and he's got really, really good physical tools. But you can see, like, he kind of plays a bit like he thinks he's got an extra second that you're going to get
Yeah,
in the
of course.
Bundesliga. You're always going to have one extra second in the Bundesliga compared in the Premier League. That second is gone. You don't get that chance to knock it back to your right and sort your feet out. It's like, no, it's got to be hit, touch,
Yeah.
shoot, hit, touch, shoot. It's like everything has to move faster. Physically, he looks up to it. Pace. He holds off defenders well. He can deal with it, which is a good thing, because a lot of players come in, they can't. But it's the speed of thought is this is
Mhm.
the evolution that it will take him some time to get to, because it's just faster. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just faster. Everything is quicker.
When you play football and you go up through the levels, what changes the most is the speed.
Mm-hmm.
That means your first touch has to be better. Your speed of
Yep.
thought has to be better. That this is where really you start getting found out. I'm not saying
Yep.
Cecil's getting found out, but I'm just
No.
because a lot of players
It's just the
they
difficulty.
adjust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thierry
Yep.
Henry had to adjust to the Premier League. Lots of players have had to do this,
Yep.
and so I'm not saying he can't adjust. I'm just saying that that's the first thing you notice when you start going through the
Yep.
level, as the game speeds up, and if you make a mistake, you get punished for it in that type of pace. Um, let's talk about Matthias Delict, because ironically he's shown his best form under Amorim and not under Ten Hag. He has been exceptional this season.
He has. I think he's been arguably, well, it's hard to split him between Mbumo and him in terms of best player, but he's been in the conversation very consistent every week, very aggressive, very strong, good in defense, scoring,
What did you
pivotal
end up paying for
goal.
him?
Was a
Was
40 million, something like that. A
40 million to get
very,
a top
very,
class centre back like that?
yep,
You look what Chelsea paid
exceptional.
for Fofana and stuff. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, and they had a few others people don't even remember anymore. Badia Chile, they paid a lot of money for a lot of players that don't even make it on the pitch, but really good, really, really good. He's been so good. I've been so impressed with his growth this season because I think last season, and this is again that adjustment period. I think it takes that little bit of time to make that judgment. Last year, I thought he was okay, but struggled a bit, gave up a lot of penalties, made some mistakes, things like that. This year, he's been near enough flawless in most games. And it's very
Yeah,
interesting as well to hear, Amram talk about him saying he's got more to go because he's still being safe with the ball. And he wants him to be, as he grows, as he gets more confident, to be more passing, doing more to progress the play out
right.
the back, being more brave and things like that. And I take that as like a positive of like he still has another level that he believes he can get to in passing. And I've been incredibly impressed with De Ligt. He just certainly one of the difference makers in that mentality aspect, where United are fighting back, and staying in it and not dropping their heads.
Yeah. But what's interesting to me about it, James, is Amarim doesn't name him in the leadership group. So you
Yeah.
were saying there, about his leadership and what have you, and about the fact that he's a player now that's becoming really, really important to United. He's maybe, would you say he's the first choice centre back out of all the centre backs that played?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it might be Luke Shaw as well, funnily enough, but
Yeah.
like, because Luke Shaw's played every game and he's actually been really, really good too, which is kind of mind blowing. But
Good, but also staying fit. Like
yeah,
there's so when go back to that Rory Jennings comment, nothing has
yeah,
changed. What the fuck are you talking about? Nothing has changed, right?
yeah. Shaw's played 11 straight Premier League games, 90 minutes. Doesn't he's been subbed once in that time.
James, I'd be the first one on here to say nothing has changed.
Yeah,
But the last 5 games have been significantly more enjoyable. Even the games that they
yeah,
didn't win, they were entertaining, right?
yep.
It's been significantly more enjoyable. And by the way, I know Spurs are not in their finest moment, but they're similar to United. The quality that they were able to bring off the bench, James,
Yeah,
the depth was significantly, because this is where United start to have problems. There's a stat out there, I'm sure we all saw it. If games finished at halftime, United would be top of the league.
yeah,
The problem starts to come when they need to make changes in games
yep.
because the quality and the players that they're bringing on, even if they're quality players, are completely different to the players
Very
that
different.
they're
Yeah, the
replacing.
continuity is the whole
Yeah,
system. Everything changes, and yeah,
correct. And
yeah,
there's definitely a bit thin there, but when you need to start to make changes, you see the quality drop off because they just don't have the same quality and type of player to replace them with. I think that is definitely something that they need to look at in January with some
yeah.
opportunities for players. I know that I was listening to some of the reviews on Young Orozco. When does he come? Next summer?
Next summer, yes.
I mean, you don't want to get too carried away, but I'm hearing people that are knowledgeable of football in that part of the world calling him Caicedo, the Colombian Caicedo.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and I've heard a lot of the same about how there's a lot of excitement about him in terms of young prospects. Like this is their not missing out on Caicedo type of moment, is getting this kid in. So that's exciting. Yeah.
looking forward to seeing him next summer. But yeah, I think in January that's something United need to look at because they're going to have to deal with the fact that Casemiro's contract is up in 6 months.
Yep.
I would be surprised. I mean, we're talking a year ago. His legs have gone.
Yeah. And to a degree, I mean, he still has to come off at 60 minutes every game.
Well,
So he's good. I'm not like he's been really good and he's really important for United. But he is too old to be the main guy there. And when he leaves and he steps off the pitch, you're not getting anybody similar to him in terms of what he's doing in quality. It's still a bit of a problem in both ways.
it's
Like
a
you
bit
wouldn't want him
weird because
starting next
well,
year. I mean.
he's 33, James. It's a bit weird to me because a 33-year-old clearly has, the physical conditioning to see out a 90-minute game of football, right? And look at Modric just doing it at 40.
Yeah.
And he is also scoring very, very important goals for United. When people were saying his legs have gone, they were saying they were gone from the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
he didn't belong at that level anymore. I I'm wrong about a lot of things, but I do remember saying that that's not how players' legs go, in my opinion.
yeah.
But now he's become a very important pivotal player that needs to be replaced. And if you want contingency planning, I know United want them Baleba. It'd be interesting to see if they went for him in January. What they would. I mean, he goes to AFCON in January, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does as well go to AFCON, I believe.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting if it'd still be despite that move for him in January, what price they get from Brighton. I mean, Brighton's playing a risky game, James, because if they try to stick to that 100 million figure, to me, his valuations dropped slightly from the summer.
Yep.
And if that decline continues to this summer, I mean,
They'll lose a lot. Yeah. I mean, nobody's even going to buy him if it,
it's a
yeah.
very risky game. And are you completely convinced by him?
No, I'm not. I don't take everything from games United play against other teams, but I think it is always interesting when you see United play against someone that they've been tracking, that they're linked to, that they like, because you get like a direct comparison between that player and your players, right? The players that you're fielding right now. You take the example of Elliot Anderson at Nottingham Forest and you compare him to Baleba 2 weeks, in a row, 2 weeks running, where they played against Brighton, they played against Forest. Elliot Anderson was much better than anybody in United's midfield that whole game. He was doing so much in that game that was impressive. And you looked at Baleba and you thought the game's passing him by. Bad turnovers. He's getting run down by Bruno and Casemiro, much older players that shouldn't be able to catch up to him, that shouldn't be finding him out. I wasn't impressed with the way he played the ball, whereas you see Elliot Anderson was defending, man marking Brian Mbeumo, to switching the play over for their goals, like doing absolutely everything. And you say, yes, I take that player, you stick him in your midfield, it's elevated. You take Baleba, you stick him in your midfield, I don't know. And I just remember the one player I want to make a direct comparison to here was Liam Delap. Because when I watched United play Liam Delap at Ipswich last season, I was like, very, very unimpressed. I thought this guy's not going to make it a high level team. I just didn't see it with him. And I know it's just one game. There's obviously other things, context surrounding it, but it's always interesting to see it that way in that direct comparison. And I think it shouldn't be ignored. So I'm not convinced he's the answer, and certainly not anywhere near that price. I mean, if they're saying, hey, look, fine, we'll sell him now for 40 million, do it because you saw something there, a potential, a good young player that could become something. Maybe he's just, disappointed not getting the move, whatever, right? But the price becomes a serious consideration.
What did Newcastle? I'm just looking up to see what Newcastle sold him to Forest for. Sorry, go ahead, Mickey. Keep going.
Yeah. So it's like I look at that and I go, yeah, with Baleba, I'm not convinced, and I think that the price should be reflected of the fact that he's only had maybe a very, very good half season. And yes, there's things you can see there, but he is a prospect. He's he's not nearly as good or refined as like Caicedo was by the time Brighton sold him to Chelsea for 100+ million. Caicedo was really good by that point, like really consistent by that
I would
point.
agree. Yeah, because it was
So
obvious.
yeah, it's
to that point.
Yeah, it's still a dice roll on Baleba a little bit, it is. And I think and this season, and he wasn't good again this last weekend. Like the price would have to reflect that for me, or it'd be a very, very big risk. But it's a risk probably worth taking at the right price still, if it's a good deal.
I'm very reluctant to pass judgment on players I don't watch every week after my fucking Mbeumo last year. Oh man, every time he scores, I'm reminded of my own stupidity. But one of the things that's quite interesting to me is Newcastle sold Elliot Anderson to Forest for 35 million. Young academy player. I understand the rules and all that, but why isn't Newcastle and Eddie Howe taking a battering of it?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's like whenever it happens to United, it's like, oh my God, look how they let go this player who turned into. I mean, not that it actually happens that much, to be quite honest,
Yeah.
but it's just it's always somebody else. It's always United is a different standard that has to be measured.
Yes. Let's say we ended up getting bad news about Sesko, where you're talking about a long-term injury. Xerxes, the only other senior striker,
Mhm.
very different player to Sesko. Is there a potential for maybe someone like a Bianchieri or something from the youth team? He's putting up some really good numbers. Maybe, obviously, Obi or any of our other young strikers. Do you think that it's possible that United will look towards your youth, or do you think that they'll go out and try to sign a striker in January?
No, I think more likely the youth aspect is probably a bigger thing there. It's really hard to know what they're gonna do in January right now, because
Mm.
they're not saying, it's not like a factor of they don't want to spend money at all or can't. They can, but they are wanting to maintain that kind of discipline of like, they're not going to be going and getting guys for the sake of it, you know what I mean? And wasting money that end up turning into nothing, that end up turning into a waste. They want to stick to the plan of their overall targets, their main guys they want to get, which I think is fine. They've got to stick to that. Um, and who can you get? I think that's the biggest challenge they're going to face in January in general. Who can you actually get? Because if you could go get Danny Welbeck, they probably
Yeah,
would do it.
exactly.
They probably would, but Brighton aren't going to sell him in January. He's fundamental to them right now. So, and then you've got AFCON. I think with AFCON, what we will see is 3 youth players. I would estimate
Mm,
will step up into the senior team during this 3-4 week
mm,
stretch. See if you have a much busier schedule, games every 4 days rather than every 7 days. We start
yeah.
to get a little bit of
Mm,
something there, and I think we'll start to see a lot more. And I bet we will find at least one young player comes through that fills some of these gaps we're missing in a spot, because it
well, I
usually
hope
happens in
so.
these
Yeah, I
scenarios.
mean,
Yeah.
you look at the way United's under-18s performed last season. They've had some fantastic young talents coming through there.
Yep.
We all know about the players that United, of course, JJ Gabriel and there's other
Yep.
young players. Shea Lacey's looking very promising.
Yep.
And there's Diego Leon. Hopefully, will start putting pressure on Patrick
Yeah.
Dorgu
Yeah.
at left back. Hopefully, there's some progress there. So I would hope that some of those young kids would be given a chance. When we saw Chido Obi play for United, we talked about players that were adjusting to the pace. That to me seemed like his biggest issue was adjusting to the pace of the Premier League. But he was to me improving game after game after game. He's probably not ready for that level. So that staggered development is really, really important, and you can't put them in too early. I would like to see him get a loan maybe in January. I know he went United with the intention of getting more game time. Um, I still think he's a lot closer to United's first team than what he would be in Arsenal. So I still think he
Yeah.
made the right move. But I would love to see him get a championship loan or something, James, because I think that championship for a young player doesn't just grow you mentally, it grows you physically.
Yeah.
I think it's an exceptional league to loan your best young talents out. But yeah, I think preferably we bring 1 or 2 young players in. But
Yeah.
I mean, bringing them in up front, if you don't score, you get massacred.
Yeah.
You quickly go from an exciting young prospect with United's fan base to being a fraud
Yeah.
after about 2 games. That's about all you get, and that
And
is
though it would help coming in when United are actually winning games and such and
yes,
doing
yes,
quite well,
yes,
because that's part of the problem. Is like, you take last year, we were struggling. We were losing every week, not winning games. And any young player, it becomes an impossible environment, because I think the fans are much more forgiving in general. And I think everybody is, when you're winning games, a young player can
yeah,
come in, they don't
yeah.
have to produce. It's okay. And they'll get more time and more patience when you're not winning. So it's kind of, I think this stretch up until mid-January and with AFCON is probably the best bet, because United play this, and this also illustrates, by the way, how difficult the first half not first
Yes,
half, but first quarter of the season
exactly.
was the next 10 games, 8 are against bottom half sides. Like that tells you just how much United played first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, and like ninth and 10th in the league already. And it's like the next 8 games they playing like Wolves twice. And so it's been difficult. So this stretch is where if United can win, it's probably a bunch of games. It's the right time to bring some of these young players into a slightly lower pressure environment, but also a winning environment and a positive one where they're not going to be asked to save United. You know what I mean? Just come in and find your flow
Right.
within the team.
Yeah, of course, it's trying to step into a Manchester United team that's losing. It's difficult, even if you're a fully fledged professional,
Yep.
to pick your career. It's swallowed up so many people. United do have some exceptional young talents. We almost lost the record of consecutive games with a youth player being on the bench. I don't want that stat being artificially sustained. It should be outstanding because on merit, players have made it into the first team. Um, I I wouldn't be devastated if it disappeared. I don't. I just think it's one of those things that's nice to say. If you could turn around and say, other than one game, United have had a youth player in their squad since 1933. That is still an exceptional statistic. Not having what if it just happens once, where you don't have a youth team player on in the squad, it doesn't validate the exceptional record
Yeah.
that United have. But I think that when we look at the rules today, James, they're it's getting harder and harder to justify putting young players in your squad whenever there's such a benefit now to selling them.
It is. It is. There is such a benefit to letting them go, to moving them on, and the profitability and everything that comes with it. And I mean, ironically, by the way, and I'd be interested to know how many times this happened over the course of the time. Is that Tom Heaton also would have kept the stat alive,
Yeah,
and it's like it's sort of funny when you look at it that way. Like how many times that stat been kept alive by someone like Tom Heaton, like an extra goalkeeper or something like that, who's been in the squad. Probably quite a few times, to be quite honest, over
because
the
they would.
years. But
Mark Ogden, and I know Ogden quite well. He's a friend of mine, but he was questioning whether Jack Fletcher truly qualified as a United youth team player since he came at 16. To me,
I mean, as much as Garnacho did, so it's
yeah.
like,
But James, if you're 16, unless you're going into the first team to move, of course, to me, you're an academy graduate.
yeah, yeah,
A lot of kids don't join
yeah.
clubs until they're 16. Like that to me
Yeah,
is
I think that's fine.
yeah, a bit of a yeah. But
Bit snobby.
well, I just think it's trying really hard to find a way to
Yeah.
validate it, and I don't even think it says anything about Amorim. Like what I would focus on is I remember Pep Guardiola last season not even filling out benches, James.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is I agree. And look, I think it opens up a little bit of an interesting debate because I've seen people be really starkly on both sides of this, and I think maybe it deserves some understanding and depends where you're at. Because when Sir Jim made his comments, and by the way, I really do think his interview had a major impact on Amorim and the pressure around him. And I think
Interesting, wasn't
in retrospect, it shines really well on the positives of an owner speaking up and taking the pressure off and more onto themselves. I think is a good thing. But one of the comments he had that I know is in some places went down really poorly, but in others it's like was his comments on the academy, saying that the academy had really come off. And I look at it and I go, it's tough because when you look at it granularly, there's a lot of really good things that have been done in the academy, and the under 18s were great last year, and there's this and that. But then you look at this first team thing and you go, but every week people are like, oh, we're about to lose the record. We have no academy players. So I think it's like you kind of have to debate what he actually meant by that. Me personally, I think he's looking at it because of the way he was speaking, the context of the whole conversation, which wasn't nearly as bad as it was made out, was more like we're not getting academy players into the first team enough. We're not doing that enough. And that's where the academy has taken a step back, where it was producing a lot more before, where it used to produce great players regularly for United's first team. It hasn't been doing that much recently. And that's more what he was referring to, is like that part of the academy, that that end
Mm,
aspect of the academy of preparing players for the United's first team and taking that step up. You can argue, is that the job of the academy? Is that
mm,
something in between? But I believe that's what he's talking about. And I think it's fair to
mm.
say there are a lot of good things that have been happening at the academy over the last few years to improve it. And you
Sure.
can see it at the younger levels. But it's also true that it hasn't produced much of anything to make it into the first team in recent years.
Well, it's difficult. Premier League teams have really strict rules on the areas they can pull players from.
Yeah.
Like Barcelona can go
Yes.
to Valencia and take players.
Yeah.
You can't do that
Yeah.
in the Premier League.
Brexit. Yeah. Yeah. Made it a lot
Um,
worse. Yeah.
and getting players into the first team is really difficult.
Yep.
When you're selling McTominay, Garnacho, Rashford, and stuff for very up, because this is the first era we've ever had in football where there's now a very clear incentive to sell your young players.
Yep.
So comparing the modern moment to the past, I think, is unfair, because we're in an era where
Yeah.
the Premier League, to me, have to do something to recalibrate that. I understand, they put out these new FFP rules, and I understand that inevitably they need fine tuning. When you put them out, there's going to be unintended consequences to things that you didn't think about. To me, it's an obvious design flaw, James, when you're incentivizing teams to sell their young players. One, because that is negating the purpose of the transfer window. One of
Yeah.
the reasons the transfer window was brought in, James, was because that meant if a club got an injured player, they could just go to their academy and pull someone instead of going to the transfer market,
Yep.
which I don't think has worked. And I'm not a proponent of the transfer window personally. I think that you would have a lot less gossip and talk, and if the window was open all year, because there's no rush, there's no panic, there's no deadline. There's,
Yep.
to me, I don't football function fine before without it. I think some of the unintended consequences of the transfer window are obvious, with the club stockpiling players, which then prohibits the ability of young players to get in the first team. So to me, there has to be some recalibration of that. But look, it's really hard to get young players into your first team. And when Alan Hansen said that famous quote, "You'll never win anything with kids," I think he might be right today.
Yeah, it certainly is harder. It's much more difficult. And you can look at it and say that the level, last year I made a comment about how there's not much difference between 5th and 17th in the league. And that's why I didn't feel so bad about it in general. And I think this year it's kind of playing out that way. Like between 3rd and 12th, it's like 3 or 4 points right
Yeah.
now. And the
Mhm.
league is very homogenous in its quality these days. It's teams are not pulling up
Yeah.
away like they used to. It's not a two,
Yeah.
it's very difficult. It's a bloodbath in the middle between, outside of a couple really bad teams right now. It's crazy, the rest of them in there. And you can change 10 spots in one weekend, even still at this point, which is unusual. But and so it does mean that it's like the margins are really small, and it's hard to bring in just young players and young players and young players, and it's all going to be okay. They have to be brought into these really stable environments, or they have to be brought into teams that are okay with losing and have to be okay to lose. And it's not going to kill them to lose. Like you mentioned before about why Brighton have been able to do that, because it's okay to bring guys in, to finish in 10th.
Yeah.
United have to be probably, and this is what I was saying, I think it'll be easier if we were winning a lot of games and we start to separate out a little bit to bring some of these young players in, because it's like, we can't even, Amram looking at the team right now is going, I can't even find minutes for Mainu and Xerxes because the margins are so small. Every time we make a change, we lose. We start losing.
By the
We
way, I hate
suffer.
that you need to have this few games.
I
It's
know
shit.
it sucks. Yeah, it really does suck.
I'm sitting here trying to find something to do. But it seems like it's too long between games. But
It's so long, and it creates this problem too for the youth level, because like, when are they going to play, and
I
who are
know.
they going to play over right now? If you're trying to bring a youth player in, is it, next time Jack Fletcher, who should he have come on
Yeah.
instead of, really, when you think about it, like, you can't, still Xerxes didn't even get a minute. at the weekend. You know what I mean? And it's like, and then you're getting injuries, and you have to sub center backs, and you have to sub fullbacks, and Casemiro has to come off, and it's like,
Yeah.
and there's one
Now
game,
you,
and then you have 2 weeks.
now you have to put Xerxes into a team where he's not match fit
Yeah,
because he just doesn't have that rhythm.
yeah.
Liverpool lost 3-0 at the weekend against City. United lost 3-0 against City too. But to me, they were very different games. United, had control possession in that game, greater possession stats, and United missed some gilt edge opportunities. And the Casemiro one, and Brumo had a brilliant chance that was saved. And to me, it was a different 3-0. You're talking about a manager, James, that spent 50 million short of $500 million this summer. That is 200 million more than what Liverpool Football Club was bought for by FSG. Right? There is the lack of criticism and focus is unbelievable. There is no era in Manchester United's history. I don't care if they won the treble the season before. If they'd went out and spent that type of money, look what happened with Varane. Slaughtered. This just shows you how difficult it is at United, where there's this hyper fixation on everything that they do, and that is the one variable with young players you don't know how to scale, and you're not sure how that's going to work. How does a young player deal with playing mentally for Manchester United? You can have all the talent in the world, but it's very, very difficult to judge how they're going to deal with all these other intangibles that you can't scale. You can get away with it at other clubs because that focus isn't there. With Liverpool, I mean, if you're a young player going into that Liverpool team, I don't even think that journalists would notice if you had 6 months of a shit season.
Yeah,
you made it. You 6 minutes of a shit season, you're getting destroyed.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. It's a totally different environment and a totally different way that all of these things get dealt with in terms of the pressure and all of that. So, and that is what makes it hard as well. I mean, it's no accident. It's like it was easy. Part of it as well is that we've been, after in the post Sir Alex sort of era, I think for United, a lot of fans, we had years of more patience. A lot of people had more years of patience during that time because it was like, all right, it's a new, we got to start this whole thing over. We'll be back soon. Everybody, when Jose arrived, when LBG was there, we were all like, it's fine. It's been a couple years out in the woods, but we'll be back soon. So we're okay. Some young players coming in and we're not winning as much and things like that. After 10 years of what had happened, I think people are at such a point where it's like, even though we've kind of been worse than ever, there's more impatience than ever to get back into it. It's hard. The pressure. It's a unique environment. Yeah.
What United were trying to do for a decade was cut corners. We're a big, massive football club. I know we're doing a lot of things wrong, but we'll start the squad up with 3 or 4 big name players, and we're back.
Yep.
And that you may get that may sustain you for a little while, but there's no foundation to that, and eventually you're going to find yourself in the situation United found themselves in. I'm going to throw a quick stat at you that I meant to mention when we were talking about Casemiro. 3 of the 19 goals United have conceded this season, by the way, this is from Paul Gaskell, P. Gaskell 13. 3 of the 19 goals we've conceded this season have been when Casemiro was on the pitch. Monumental turnaround by him this season. That is unbelievable. So of the 19
I think it
goals,
ended up actually being 5 out of 20 by the end. So that might have been from before, but
this was on my spuds. I can't see them. Hang on a minute.
Because I know it's higher now. I because there was the 2 against Forest. There was 2 specifically against Forest. Because I know it was only 3 before the Forest game.
8th of November. He tweeted that. So
maybe it was a retweet or
2
something.
days ago.
United have
before the Spurs.
United have conceded. That's weird. They've conceded.
All right, even if I made that stat up, it's a good one.
It's close. It's close. Either way, it's no. But the thing is I think the real number is 5 out of 20, and if you include the Grimsby game, 5 out of 20 have come when Casemiro's been on the pitch, and and I think there's obviously other factors in that too why that happens, but it is a real stat and it's meaningful, I think, and I think it's the biggest issue. Maybe I don't know if it's the biggest issue. I have one other issue that I think needs solving, but it's an issue that seriously,
because the other amazing stat is, James, United haven't lost a game since Lamens has come in.
Yes, yes,
And I don't think enough was being made of that. Florian Wirtz isn't
yeah,
getting any criticism, and no one's pointing out, because I thought Lamans played well again at the weekend. No one
yeah,
is pointing out, you nothing has changed. They're even saying that. He's, I'm really have a level of comfort and confidence now when the crosses
yeah,
come
me too.
in, when the bread and butter stuff, James, because it was the bread and butter stuff that worried me
Yep.
with Onana and Bandera. It wasn't, he should have saved that. He made us, better goalkeeper. It was the unforgivable stuff, the
Yeah.
concentration lapse.
And
Um,
and 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 even though we're conceding goals, it's like you take the Spurs ones, the 2 they've scored, really unfortunate deflections,
yeah,
ones that he's no chance
yeah,
to get to,
yeah. That's
right?
not going in. That
He's
second one,
doing the
that was
basics
the
well.
first
He
one.
did he had a couple very good saves and a lot of simple things, no big mistakes.
Yeah.
Like he does that well, and that's the
And by
good
the
part.
way, I think he had something to do with that goal, because he comes up and he confuses Spurs'
Yeah,
defense.
he did. They were all mixed up with him and ended up with Delict getting extra room. So you got to give him a little goalkeeper assist on that one.
One of the things that I really liked about that, mate, was the way United players celebrated that equaliser. You could
Yeah,
see that there's a growing morale and a camaraderie and a unity where, you know, okay, you want to win the game, but that last minute equaliser, I think that if United are going into this international break, like we were saying earlier, all the old negativity's coming back. Instead, 5 games, 3 away, unbeaten. Mate, who wouldn't have taken that? Ruben Amorim, manager of the month. Who wouldn't have taken that? When
no losses international break to break. We've had none since the last international break. They feel very good about that for sure. They definitely they'll be going at it and saying, "All right, it's a positive that you can build on rather than a disappointment to end off, this little run here." And that's where they'll take is that positive.
when we were doing this podcast last season, we were doing them twice a week, because of
Yeah,
course United had a lot more
lots of
fixtures.
games.
Then seems like we don't record that much, and then I have international break next week. So I want to make sure that we'll do a podcast next week. Maybe we'll just open it up to questions or something, and
Yeah, we can get some questions
yeah,
and
yeah,
things like
so
that.
that we don't. It seems like there's big long gaps between them. But anything else, mate, before we go?
No, I just hope, on that thing like we said with Casemiro, that I think United needs some kind of solution, be it
Yeah, I was
youth,
watching
be
your
it the
video.
market, just get somebody in who can do a bit more what he does profile wise, because it's not even about talent. Like we saw what happened when Kobe came in from against Brighton. Different player, different skill set. Something doesn't work when Casemiro comes off the pitch in the middle. We're just not
Yeah.
getting it. That has to be solved somehow.
Well,
Um, Very
then that
important.
raises a question about Agarte.
Hmm.
So that means, because Agarte is usually the one that comes in to replace
Yep.
Casemiro, and probably the closest we have to that. But have you given up on Agarte?
He hasn't been a success for sure. Like he's not coming in and giving us what we need, I think, at the moment, unfortunately. And it's a bit too erratic. It's not, you
Mm,
know, the calm defending that we need often in the situations that he's coming in for. He was a lot better again, I think, next to Casemiro, not as his
yeah.
replacement, where he's got a shield behind him and he has a totally different job on the pitch. I think in this role, he's not going to cut it. It's going to be
I
dangerous, you know?
I think in Agarte and Manu's defense, Xerxes and all that, it's very difficult to come in, and when you're only getting 15 minutes here,
Yes,
10 minutes there,
it
choose
is.
and have match rhythm and everything. I think that's a really difficult
Yeah,
thing
cup
to do.
games and little Europe games were giving a lot of players rhythm in the past,
Yeah,
where then you could take that into a Premier League game, but you're not getting any of that now. It's hard. We've seen that with all the subs. They're almost always been poor. And when you get a pattern like that, you got to say it has something to do with the fact it's not enough time to get anywhere, get anything going.
yeah, I would agree. Okay, mate, we'll go ahead and leave it there. We'll be back again. We'll come back next week. We'll do podcasts where we'll take your questions and stuff, but we'll make sure we get something out. So thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast. Thanks to all of you for your likes, retweets, everything else. Much appreciated. I hope you're well physically, mentally. Much love, mate. Take it easy, Jamesy.
See you later.
See you later, bye.